Topic of our Casebook presentation was immigration. Immigration is the process by which people come into a foreign country to live there. Immigration has been around for a long time now. However, it was in the 1890s when the Immigration Act of 1891 was established. This act focused on immigration rules and the enforcement mechanisms for foreigners arriving from countries other than China. This led to the question, why did people want to immigrate? These immigrants moved because they wanted more freedom. More freedom would lead to more success and a stable life. Although many immigrants come into foreign countries legally, there are many that attempt to come in illegally. This is when the migration of people into a foreign country violates the immigration laws of that foreign country, and one common form of illegal immigration is illegally crossing the border. The topic I chose to present was The Case for Open Borders by Joseph Cairns. Joseph Cairns is a political science professor at the University of Toronto who was born in 1945. He is also a member of the Royal Society of Canada and has taught in many well-known institutions such as Princeton University, and he has written many highly praised books regarding studies of immigration. Some of the books he wrote included The Ethics of Immigration, Immigrants and the Right to Stay, and Culture, Citizenship, and Community. His works have been published in many well-known journals such as The Political Theory and Boston Review. Because of all these accomplishments, Cairns is a credible, knowledgeable source that is able to provide both sides of an argument with sufficient evidence. The work that Cairns wrote that I'll be analyzing is titled The Case for Open Borders. Analysis. So why do borders exist and what do they do today? The borders of today are filled with armed guards who patrol the area at all times. One reason that these borders exist is that citizens of the defended country are protected from terrorists, armed invaders, and criminals. Although this is a strong point as to why borders are closed, the majority of people that reach the border are just ordinary, peaceful people that mean no harm. These people attempting to cross the borders are risking death just to have an opportunity at living a secure life. But when they attempt to cross, they are faced with guards holding guns at their chests. Although this seems cruel, it may seem right to insiders that excluding non-citizens is essential in sovereignty for political communities that seek self-determination. At the end of the day, it's that country's choice to allow the immigrants in or to leave them out. So why should borders be open? The explicit argument in this work is that borders should be open and that people should be allowed to leave their country they originally came from and go on to live wherever they want, such as developed countries in Europe and North America. Cairns starts off by explaining how Western democracies are the modern-day equivalent of feudal class privilege. He states, to be born a citizen of a rich state in Europe or North America is like being born into the nobility. To be a born citizen of a poor country in Asia or Africa is like being born into the peasantry in the Middle Ages. There's a lot of inequality just based on where one is born because of the privileges one is born with. So how does state control over immigration limit freedom of movement? The first reason as to why borders should be open is that state control over immigration limits freedom of movement. All humans deserve the right to go wherever they please, and borders are preventing that right. According to Cairns, this right/freedom contributes to individual autonomy both directly and indirectly, and with open borders this freedom would benefit a lot. However, the freedom to move wherever one pleases cannot be an unqualified right because of traffic control and other public order requirements. But these restrictions do need to be morally justified. The justification needs to take account the interests of the people excluded and the people that are already in the country. It has to be fair for all human beings, and this argument is unsound because although each premise is true, it won't always lead to the conclusion that state control over immigration limits freedom of movement. because of the uncertainty, inductive reasoning is used. How can the freedom of movement increase equality and opportunity? The next reason why borders need to be open is that the freedom of movement is necessary for equality and opportunities. It has been established that certain social positions should be determined by one's hard work and talents, and not by birth-related characteristics such as gender, race, or any other characteristics that are irrelevant to how well one can perform at a certain social position. However, this logic assumes that all humans are of equal moral worth, and that there isn't a natural hierarchy of birth that entitles people to advantageous social positions. In the real world, this is not realistic, and the freedom of movement is necessary in order to find the opportunities. This is why the freedom of movement is important for the equality of opportunity. According to Karen's, in the modern world, we have created a social order in which there is no commitment to equality of opportunity for people within democratic states, but no pretense of or even aspiration to equality of opportunity for people across states. Because of this social order and the restrictions on the freedom of movement, there are so many people in the world who are talented and capable of many things, but are limited to what they can do because of their social circumstances of birth. This is why those who defend restrictions on immigration cannot justify the inequalities of opportunity that come with restrictions. Overall, this argument is unsound because there is some faulty analogy in it. The argument uses deductive reasoning because the argument goes from a general point of how freedom of moving would help the equality of opportunity to giving specific examples on the benefits. How can borders bring about more equality in the world? The third reason why borders should normally be open is that a commitment to equal moral worth entails some commitment to economic, social, and political equality, partly as a means of realizing equal freedom and equal opportunity, and partly as a desirable end in itself. If the freedom of movement is enhanced with the opening of borders, there will be a tremendous reduction in the political, social, and economic inequalities of today. Millions of people in poor states who want to move into countries that have economic opportunities will be able to if the borders are open, and they will be able to turn their lives around. As Karen said, the exclusion of so many poor and desperate people seems hard to justify from a perspective that takes seriously the claims of all individuals as free and equal moral persons. This final argument is sound because the structure of the argument is logical. Deductive reasoning is used because the broad subject of classes is turned into a subject of lower class people wanting freedom economically and socially. Further analysis. So some fallacies that were seen in the work included appeal to pity, and this was when Cairns talked about moving as a freedom and how it takes away imprisonment, and that helped in winning sympathy for those who are trying to cross the border. And another fallacy was argument to the people, and this was when the lower and middle classes were brought up in Karen's argument, and Karen's brought them up because he wanted them to support him and about how there will be so much more equality and opportunity if borders are opened up. Finally, a faulty analogy was used when he finished talking about the equality of opportunity and switched to the topic of feudalism, which has nothing to do with opportunity. And although there was a linkage that he created, the equality of opportunity still has nothing to do with feudalism, but he still used that as an analogy. And when talking about pathos, the tone of the work is optimistic, and it emotionally appeals to those who want to cross the border. Thank you.
Hi, I'm Joel. I'm going to be talking about Victor Davis Hanson's Our Brave New World of Immigration. In this article, Victor talks about illegal immigrants. He goes on to say that he sees them get up in the morning and do the hard labor no other American wants to do. He tries to make his point clear in the beginning about illegal immigrants, seeing that He sees hard laborers pile into vans early in the morning, going to do the jobs in the fields, such as picking strawberries, thinning trees, or they go into the city even earlier in the morning to the housing tracks, placing cement, framing walls, doing construction, and other jobs that they're looking for. He goes on to talk about how illegal immigrants are willing to do intense labor for any sort of money. Um, Most illegal immigrants are young men and women trying to come over from countries to help support their families back home or their families that they brought to America. Usually, young men are seen making the money and about 60% of them send the money back home to their home country to support their families so that they could pay for any expenses that they are using down there. Um, he brings up a point about America and how we believe it's a win-win system for illegal immigrants coming into the United States. He feels that America is prideful and that we um, are just happy someone is willing to get up early in the morning and do the intense work no one else wants to do. He feels America is just letting it happen in a sense, saying that sometimes like letting them work because the employer can pay a lower rate so that they can have better work. This is illegal without the proper steps taken care of. There's a $3,000 fine or 6 months in jail for the employer who hired the illegal immigrant. When America feels it's a win-win scenario, feels that American people don't understand, let alone care for who comes in and goes. Like I said, they're just happy that people are going to get up early in the morning and do the intense work that no one else wants to do. He brings up illegal immigrants throughout his article, and he also brings up a story talking about how an illegal immigrant was driving a truck and caused a head-on collision with another truck, killing 3 people and 8 more injured. He ended up flooding the scene. Um, Victor said that he heard this from his house one morning and that no one ever found out who it was because the illegal immigrant didn't have any papers, any citizenship, so no one knew who he was. The driver fled the scene after, and he talks about the story. He seems pondering. He starts pondering the illegal immigrant that he was on drugs or drinking or didn't know how to drive a car in general. So it kind of gives a way about how he thought of illegal immigrants and who they were. But that's a very broad, not broad. That's a very um, wild thing to say, very upfront thing to say, saying that he must have been drunk or very um, intoxicated to drive a vehicle in that standard because he was an illegal immigrant. He goes on to state that many young men come into the work and they work that 60% of the money goes back, or 60% of the men that make money send the money back to their home countries for their families. He brings up the Europeans in the 19th century and talks about how they migrated to the U.S. soil legally. He talks about this in an ethical sense and saying that if people come over to the United States legally, there will be no problems and less issues. Um, he also explains his unappreciation towards those who migrated illegally as he feels there is a relationship between illegal immigrants and crime, saying that the more illegal immigrants that come in, there's going to be more crime rates that are around those areas that are housing the illegal immigrants. He explains that a third of all foreign born people in the U.S. are illegal. This makes up for 3 to 4% of the American population. There is also estimated of 11 to 12 million illegal immigrants totaled in the United States, and also 1/10 of the Mexican population resides in the United States illegally. He goes on to say this, saying he's proving what he believes his point is with statistics showing that there is this many amount of people within the U.S. soil, but he also talks about how America is also could be the problem as we are ignoring the factor of what is important in our country and what we need to figure out altogether. And we need to stop being so prideful in our ways, and we need to figure out what the real problems in our country are and put those to rest and then move on to what other problems that we may need to figure out.
Hello, my name is Rachel, and I will be talking about immigration through visuals. We've all heard the saying, a picture tells 1,000 words, and I feel like that is very true in this case because we can talk about the statistics and the background information of immigration affecting our nation and the nations around us, but to really show images of that is very impactful and important to show. So the first image I'm going to show you, which is all from our textbook, is the deck of the SS Patricia. It is showing people traveling from Hamburg to New York in late 1900. So from the mid 1800s to the early 20th century, 600,000 people migrated to the United States per year, and that was an average taken. So every single year, about that many people would migrate to the US, and became to be known as the Great Wave. Now, this was very impactful to the United States, the amount of people coming into the nation, and it wasn't just for other people wanting to get a better life in what was known as to be the great United States of America. It was really helping us as well because industrialization was booming and factory workers were very much needed in the US. We needed factory workers to come work to help improve our nation as a whole. So it was a win-win situation for everyone. So we had people coming in for themselves, and it really impacted and benefited us as a nation as a whole. And it was actually known that in the work field, it was easier for immigrants who were not from America to move up in status and ranking in their jobs versus native born Americans. So that was another little incentive for them to come over. And in this image here, we see the deck of the SS Patricia. It's an Atlantic liner boat, and you can really see how packed full the boat is. It doesn't look very comfortable. They are shoulder to shoulder. So many people packed on that boat just waiting to come to America. So it really shows almost the desperation of these people wanting their better lives and wanting something more in life than just what they had before. So they really packed together and were in very uncomfortable living situations, but they knew it'd be worth it to come to America. In this next picture, we see a Thai Army helicopter. And this is a more recent case of why immigration is important. We see that in 2015, the people of Rohingya were fleeing from what was previously known as Burma. They were being persecuted in their country that they were from, and they needed to get away. So what happened was actually their boat was set adrift and they were lost at sea, and they had no way of getting to anything. So thankfully, the Thai army sent them supplies by helicopter, so they were dropping the supplies onto the boat and inevitably into the water. And we see all the people and things in the water. People jumped out of the boat to swim to collect supplies because they were so desperate for these supplies of food and fresh water and probably other supplies that they needed as well. And they just really were so desperate to get these. And later on, people were interviewed on the ship and found out that people and children had died days before, like the Thai army had helped them. And these people, we kind of raised the question of what causes this desperation to risk your own life to leave your own home. And they knew the risks of leaving their previous country and setting out on the ocean. They knew the risks of what would come with that, but they still left because they knew that this risk of potentially dying at sea was worth leaving what they had previously known before. This next picture is at the United States and Mexico border, and it's a picture of a Honduran mother and daughter being detained at the border. And we see this image, and it blew up when it was first taken. It was very popular. We see it's most likely nighttime with the lighting. A car is there, and you see police officers gathered around the mother and daughter, and you see guns in their holsters. And we just look at this, and you see the mother tying the daughter's shoes, and just this sweet bond between the two. You can tell they love each other very much. And the image really captures that even if during their unfortunate circumstance, they still love each other and are still connected to what they're holding on to. Because no matter what, like where you are located, what your situation is, this bond is unbreakable. We can really see that through this image. And it really goes to show that her bringing her young daughter, she just wants to leave what unfortunate situation she is with in Honduras. She wants to get away to go to the United States, and she thought the best option would be to do that illegally. And we cannot say anything that illegal immigration is bad or unfair in this situation, because we see like the love that she has for her daughter. She was just doing it out of love and respect for her daughter to get her a better life. So it's a very hard thing to combat when you're looking at the love she has for her daughter, and it's just she wants a better life for her. Yes, she is being detained, but we still have to feel bad for her and her situation, that she just wants a better life. Next image is from Ellis Island. And Ellis Island served as the main immigration import in the United States. It was located in New York, and it served as a perfect location for immigrants coming across the Atlantic Ocean. So they would check into the island. It would be like an hour, many hours long process of trying to fully immigrate into the United States, because you have to go through many stations and checkpoints to fully integrate into the United States. Sometimes they would even change your name, and many protocols were taken for you to legally immigrate into the United States officially. And the question is raised is, how did Ellis Island represent a beacon of hope to those immigrating into the country? When you saw the Statue of Liberty and you saw Ellis Island, you were so happy, you were saved, you were finally away from whatever situation you were at before, and you could finally spread a fresh start. And even if you were a factory worker or just had like a lower job, you were happy, because America just represented so much hope and a beacon of hope for so many people. And these next pictures are actually pictures I took myself. I visited Ellis Island a couple of years ago, and I took a picture of my grandfather's name on the wall. So my great-grandfather immigrated from Italy through Ellis Island into America. His name was Mario John Pizzorno. His name is kind of like highlighted in the lower picture. And then the upper picture in the corner is his actual official certificate recognizing that he was on the wall of the list of immigrants, and he's officially a citizen in the United States. And it was very exciting for my family to go visit there, because we realized that if they had not immigrated from Italy, like, we would not be here today. And I know immigration is such a touchy subject for so many people, but we really see how it impacts the lives of so many people, and is so important to so many families today. I guarantee that most of the people in this class are coming from some line of immigrants from the past. Like, very few people are natively born to America. When America was first started, like, everyone immigrated to America to start it. So I feel like all of these pictures really show like the amount of love and heat and just pressure from immigration and how it really has impacted the nation.
Hello, I'm Jenna Abdel Nasser, and this is Immigration, What is to be Done. I'm going to be doing my presentation on Beyond the Wall by Raihan Salam. Historical and contextual info, issue at question. Raihan Salam's article proposes the issue of why immigration between the U.S. and Mexico has become a great problem. For the past century, an enormous portion of Mexican migration has been impermanent, so-called as a circular migration, in which Mexicans, mostly the men, went to the U.S. for work, often in agriculture, after they got back to their families in Mexico during the slow time of year. Economic inequality, rural poverty, significantly lower wages, and better opportunities have also played a role throughout the 20th century as factors pulling Mexicans to migrate to the U.S. There are many positive factors that contribute to immigrants, but the point that Salam was trying to get across is that there's negative effects on America which can be fixed. Those negative aspects include the following. They're taking American jobs, lowering our wages, abusing the welfare state, increasing the budget deficit and government debt, increasing economic equality, increasing crime rates, etc. It all began to become a greater issue than ever before when old President Donald Trump began his attempt of building a wall and consuming stronger border patrol. One quote that is mentioned in the article, Beyond the Wall, is that Trump seems as though there is a competition between the U.S. and Mexico through the economy. Salam says one of his more provocative claims was that Mexico was in effect using the U.S. as a dumping ground, sending not its best and brightest across the border, but rather its drug dealers and rapists. This provides the constant drag of migrants to be looked at as a full of resentfulness. Donald Trump has always insulted Mexico several times, which made things go downhill. He would say things like, they are not our friend, or they're sending people that have a lot of problems and then bringing those problems onto us. Trump has even gone ahead and said in the past that looking at countries like Mexico, they're killing us on the border, just absolutely destroying us all. In terms, he meant it as Mexico is destroying us through economic development. It is true, though, that U.S. has served as an almost economic escape valve for Mexico. Immigration could and has led to some displacement of native-born workers who then experience structural unemployment. For example, if migrants gain unskilled labor because they are willing to work for lower wages, those native-born low-skilled workers may find it harder to gain new employment in higher-skilled occupations. With this information, Salam gathered a thought about helping Mexico has been a struggle. He continues and says that if poor Mexicans had better prospects for advancement at home, far fewer of them would choose to settle in the United States. If the U.S. and Mexico could take steps together, don't you think the economy could potentially turn into the best it's ever been? One definite straightforward step that the federal government could take would be to aid state-level efforts to curb illegal immigrants. Salam's overall approach in the article is that he's trying to find ways to better the immigration relationship between Mexico and America. His ways of achieving a more positive outlook has a lot to do with winning the Mexican government over. Prevailing upon the Mexican government by assisting it with setting out work open doors at home may be less sincerely fulfilling than attempting to bully Mexico into doing or offering, as Donald Trump would normally like. A harassing approach would in all likelihood drive the Mexicans into taking a more ill-disposed position. Interesting to Mexico's personal responsibility would have a far more noteworthy possibility of accomplishment. Rather than conceding all the more less gifted migrants, the U.S. could permit U.S. retired folks to utilize Medicare in Mexico, a straightforward measure that would address various issues on the double. In the article, Salam insists we work together by saying that, in a similar vein, the U.S. ought to consider encouraging U.S. retirees to settle in Mexico. The next step that Salam is saying we need to take is to settle on their land so we can grow the economy for each other. As the number of inhabitants in the U.S. cycle, home well-being associates and other low-wage administration laborers who can accommodate the old are expanding. The rising interest is frequently referred to by backers of higher migration levels. Salam also mentions it would generate employment opportunities for less skilled workers in Mexico. It would reduce the demand for less skilled immigrant workers in the U.S. This then would reduce Medicare expenditures. Ethos, pathos, and logos are used throughout the article. Salam is very intelligible for this because he is trying to persuade his audience by saying, if we do this, then this can be fixed. That credibility, emotional appeal, and logic is needed for that approach to the audience. For Ethos, he represents many credible sources such as the Pew Research Center, Donald Trump, and Bob Davis of the Wall Street Journal. By including these factors, he gives off a knowledgeable appeal by including well-known sources to back his statements up. For Pathos, he uses a strong tone that sends positive, demanding feedback to the readers. He uses this through vivid language. For example, when he was explaining what Trump said, he made sure he used the words drug dealers and rapists to catch the eye of the seriousness that this topic presents. This appeal hangs on to Americans and Mexicans to show how much tensity there is between another. The constant back and forth of immigration and economy. Now for logos, Salam uses many statistics to put logic behind his reasonings. He uses statistics in parts of when he explains how many. For example, when he talked about how many Mexican immigrants are in the U.S., he used statistics by saying 2.94 million Mexican nationals settled in the U.S., while only 670,000 returned home. He continued and said there are still roughly 5.6 million Mexican immigrants illegally in the U.S. One quote that stood out to me was, had the Obama administration been more aggressive about immigration enforcement, the number of illegal immigrants in the U.S. would almost certainly be considerably smaller. This stood out to me because Salam is almost bashing on the Obama administration, which could be the greatest impact on persuading the readers. He's including the faultiness of it all, which is very important in my opinion. Now, the discussion question is, if the U.S. and Mexico could take steps together, don't you think the economy could potentially turn into the best it's ever been? Why or why not? Thank you.
Hi, my name is Victoria Carrasco. I'm going to be doing Talking Sense About Immigration by Tom Dispatch. My group is Immigration, What is to be Done? Dispatch breaks down this article into three different parts. It's the good guys and bad guys, racism, the immigrant threat. The last one being challenging the restrictionist agenda. In the beginning of his article, he does talk about how President Obama delayed the Dreamers Act for many people, roughly about 750,000 people. He does talk about how many Democrats and Republicans were wanting to keep it, but they were both, blaming each other for it. However, the Supreme Court just stepped in and granted many of Dreamers to renew their status. Dispatch also talks about the different ways that one could obtain their citizenship. The first one being the 1965 Immigration and Nationality Act. This gave people that had family in the United States that were citizens either by obtaining it themselves or by being native born, citizens. This gave priority to those people that had, already relatives in the United States, um, meaning they were able to, get their citizenship quicker. They were prioritized. They were moved to the front of the line. As to, one that didn't have someone in the United States, it would have, it would be a longer process. The second one being Dreamers Act, also, the DACA. The last one being the TPS, which is temporary protected status. The author does talk about how many people are trying to push for a clean Dreamer Act, meaning they want people to make sure that no one could touch the status of, the Dreamers, meaning they can't be taken away from, and we just want it to be set in stone. Moving on to the chain immigration. Chain immigration is something that he talks about how there's a misconception or there's confusion. So he points it out in this way. Basically, it's when one moves from their home and goes elsewhere for, work or for school, for any sort of thing. He does point out here how Trump did use the word chain immigration, and many people on the left, left side of the political spectrum, took it as a racial slur. But he does point out that it's not. It's a term that's been used to describe, the definition being here is the term used by academics to explain how people tended to migrate from their home communities using pre-existing networks. That could be, again, work, family, or school. And he gives great examples here on page 556. On the left, you can see the 36th president signing the Act of 1965. On the right, you can see some individuals carrying a banner that says March for DACA and TPS. I'm going to be having more commentary over, pictures. I feel like, I couldn't really find a lot of pictures that really went with the whole, article. Please bear with me. I'm sorry if I bore you with just, my plain, quotes, but I do have them here because I do want to expand on them. So he also brings up how family reunification was never an open arms policy, meaning not everyone can just come in. There are these restrictions, again, the person needs to be either a U.S. born or needs to be, needs to have U.S. citizenship. There is a quota and there's limits to quotas. I do want to say that he does point out how President Trump's, attitude towards immigration goes either one way or another, like he supports it or he's against it. He also talks about how during the President Obama administration, how he really increased massive incarceration and deportation. Um, you know, that's what he talks about. Um, to add on to that, he talks about how because of this thing that he did, it really classified the immigrants in two forms. Either they were here because they were with family, or they were here because they were felons. Um, and that's something that I'm going to touch on later on. So racism and the threat of if the threated immigrant, excuse me, racism and the immigrant threat. So going back to what I was saying, how President Obama really, was able to separate, you know, I don't want to say separate like in generalization. It's just the way he points it out is that President Obama really put immigrants either in one or two categories, meaning they're here because of family or they're here because felonies, or excuse me, because they broke the law. He does go on to say how Trump uses the same way of viewing immigrants. Either you're here because of family or you're here because you're a criminal. There's no in between. It's kind of like a black and white. um, he does again point out how Trump does feel about immigrants. um, he points this out throughout the article. Excuse me. He also talks about the U.S. Customs, how they really changed their approach towards immigration. On page 558, he talks about the U.S. Customs and Immigration Service made the new restrictions turn official in later February when it revisited its mission statement to delete the singular line U.S. USCIS secures American promise as a nation of immigrants. No longer. Instead, we are now told that the agency administrators the nation's lawful immigration system, safeguarding its integrity and promise, while protecting American security in their homeland and honoring our values. So that really tells you how a lot of things changed over the years. How they're not really being more, you know, welcoming. Rather, they're being more, I want to say, like, just, they're treating it more just like in a colder aspect, meaning there's not really too much emotion towards it. It's just, let's get this job done. But moving on to challenging the restrictionist agenda. So I do want to point out this quote says Trump and his followers, of course, want just about all immigrants to be criminalized. So again, going back to how I told you, excuse me, sorry about that. Going back to what I told you guys, how he points out how Trump goes back and forth with either pro-immigration and no pro-immigration. The author does come to like a conclusion that Trump wants to put every immigrant as a criminal, and criminal. He wants to paint them as all felons, and I do not have the quote on here, but it says right here, it says, in a sense, President Trump is correct. There isn't really a way to draw a hard, fast line between legal and illegal immigration, or between the felons and their families. Many immigrants live in mixed status households, including those who present has been authorized. Present, excuse me. Presence has been authorized in different ways or not authorized at all. And most of these felons often convicted recently. Excuse me, I just got a text message here. And most of these felons often convicted and recently criminalized immigration related or other minor violations have families too. This goes back to saying how, the quote, Trump and his followers want just about all immigration to be criminalized. So he points out how Trump is saying how you can't really determine why they're here. It's kind of, he just wants to say all illegal immigrants are not going to be, are going to be criminalized. That's what he's trying to get here, regardless if it's family or or other reasons. Other than that, that's pretty much it. You know, it's kind of fast. I did really enjoy, reading this. It really opened my eyes to a lot of different ways of, approaching immigration. Because I didn't really know, you know, with the whole different ways of one. Excuse me. I didn't really know the different ways that one could obtain, citizenship. I just thought there was one way or just two ways. You know, either being born here or the relatives. Other than that, I just want to say thank you again for hearing my presentation here, and I apologize again if I didn't have any pictures to go with my slides. Again, I just couldn't really find too many to go with them. Other than that, thank you for listening. Have a good day.